Hello and welcome back to Live Positive Ministries. This is episode 2. Episode 1, I was a rambling thing recently here where I kind of just gave an introduction to myself, who I am, the background of things with me, and hopefully you didn't suffer through that too bad. Quite honestly, almost everything I'm going to do is kind of off the cuff. It's going to be just a topic and then me really pontificating and theorizing upon that topic. If you didn't see episode 1, in short, Live Positive Ministries is we're a non-denominational church. I am Reverend J, or Reverend Jason. It depends on what you want to call me. My name is Jason. And, it's hard. I don't often like to, and not that there's any problem with saying a church or a faith or spiritualism, whatever you want to say. But it is important to understand what not being non-denominational is. Our goal is to make sure that as many people as possible understand that you can accept a creator. God is how I refer to our creator, but you may refer in another way. And understand that you do not have to subscribe to any one particular religion, one particular faith, one particular version of who and what God is in order to accept that there is a God of some sort. And if nothing else, in all of our conversations, beyond just wanting people in general to take the time to understand each other, but also to understand God, to accept God, to know that in this new world of information and science, that religions are not bad. They are sometimes practiced in bad ways, but they in of themselves, they are not bad. All a religion is, and I'll say this in every podcast, and forgive me, you'll get tired of hearing it, but they are paths. Every faith is a path. It was created by man in order to try to understand our creator and try to understand something that we just can't understand. There's no way of knowing if you're right, I'm right, if my opinions are correct, or my beliefs are correct, or your beliefs are correct. We don't know until the day we die. When we die, either we find out or we don't, right? I've often told people who tell me, why do you believe in heaven and God, and why do you believe in an afterlife? And I said, because for me, that's the world I want to live in. I don't want to live in a world where when I die, it's just done. There's too much in this life that means something to me, and to think that it was all for absolutely nothing other than this experience, it's just not what I want to accept. It's not where I find my comfort. It's not where I find my reality. It may be so for you, right? But even that's possible, and there still is a God. Okay, there could be a God, and there could still be nothing after this. There could be a creator, and yet even when we're done, this one time is it. This is what you get. It's possible. And I'm going to go into all kinds of theories and ideas and thoughts. And I do invite, and I hope that as we get listeners and we gain listeners, that you do interact with us. It's very important. It's not just about, I'm going to be putting this on Podbean, and I'm going to put this on Recast, and I'm going to be putting, on all kinds of podcasting sites. But I am also going to add some graphics and videos and probably put it up to Rumble and YouTube and other channels like that. And it will be very important to me to receive feedback. And that being said, we do have an email. It's livepositiveministries@gmail.com. And I really would like anybody that hears any of these, if you have questions about faith or your feelings about life in general, and you'd like to talk about it, we'll talk about it. I'll try to reply to some emails. Maybe in particular, I'll talk about certain issues on the podcast, and try to answer your questions and give you my opinions. But one of the things for me is it's really important is kind of the nature of God, what God is, what that means to you, me, or anybody else, and really the biblical. And now I say biblical, I'm going to go from, the Bible, the Quran. I'm going to talk about, the Book of Mormon, whatever, whatever organized faith that you want to talk about, and how that general perception of God is. And maybe I'll wander into a little bit and I definitely will, of my youth, and even times that I question the rigidity of faith. In a later episode, we will kind of get into some of the problems with the rigidity of faith these days, and why I really think that that's a problem. But I've always had issues with religion. Again, not in that there's anything bad about it. It's, again, every faith is simply a path. It's simply a map, a guide map to finding your way to your Creator, finding your meaning in life, and finding your God. You can choose one of the ones that are already out there, or you can create your own path, okay, and forge forward and create your own way. But we always ask here at the ministry to please just take the first step, okay? That being said, I went to Lutheran school as a child, and I was raised in a very strict Lutheran family. And at Good Shepherd Lutheran is, where I have some of my first memories. I went to a place in Chicago, Zion Lutheran, when I was very young. But Zion Lutheran, like I said, I was very young at that time. I didn't question much. But by the time I was in Florida and at Good Shepherd Lutheran, I had at that time, some problems with inconsistencies that I saw. And I'm talking at this time, I'm only, 6 years old, but we read the Bible cover to cover, page to page. We spent a lot of time understanding all of what was in the Bible. And I remember I had a teacher, I won't say her name at this time, but we were having one of our religion classes, and we were talking about the nature of Jesus and people knowing Jesus and people having to, accept Jesus in their lives in order to find the kingdom of heaven and to be forgiven and to be able to go into heaven. And so I'd asked my teacher, I raised my hand and I said, well, what if they don't know Jesus? They don't have an opportunity to know Jesus. Does this mean they're condemned to hell? And she said, yes. Without Jesus and without accepting God as we understand God and God of the Bible, they cannot be saved, and therefore, they will go to hell. And I had a hard time with that, and even at 6-7 years of age. And I know this is going to sound like a bit of a story, but it's true. I looked at her, and I says, but what if they had no opportunity? What if they were like on an island and never ever saw anyone who knew anything about Jesus, and yet they still prayed to God and for good things and whatever they thought God was at the time? And I'm probably going to say it a lot more sophisticated now than I did at the time. But she got visibly frustrated with me, and she goes, then they should have known in their heart, and they should have found Jesus then. And if not, they're condemned to hell. Again, I pushed a little bit more, and I ended up down in the pastor's office for continuing to push. But I says, okay, but what if they're like on an island and let's say there was a rock and something happened by that rock where someone was saved and they just thought the rock represented God. They prayed to God. They thanked God. They, made offerings of food, whatever, because we often talked about worshiping false idols and things of that nature. And they said, well, then they definitely would go to hell because they're worshiping a false idol. They're not worshiping God. And again, I questioned how does that make sense? Because they think that's God. That's the only thing they can know as God. And when I got in trouble and was sent to the principal was the minister, the pastor of our church there. And he was a little more forgiving, but at the same time, questioning things that way, not to try to be obstinate, not to try to be intentionally difficult. It was just to try to understand. As a child, I really cared about God and what God was, and I wanted to do the right thing, and I was just trying to understand. Because even at that age, and maybe even more so because I was that age and I wasn't so programmed yet into certain things, it just didn't seem right to me. It didn't seem reasonable. It didn't seem correct that people are going to be condemned to hell for what? For what? It just doesn't make sense. And, that stuck with me throughout the years. And, as I explained in episode 1 in my introduction, I had a lot of falling outs with God within my life due to, situations within my life. But, as much as I wanted to deny that I had the faith in God any longer, I believed in God. Deep down, I always knew that I did. And as I found God again, I started having these conversations and these thoughts and working things through my head of, what's the nature of God and what are the problems that I have with religion and faith in general, and an organized religion, I should say at that point. It's not faith, but organized religion. And there were just so many holes in the Bible for me, right? And I do understand, and most people do know, and I'm, for those of you that don't, I know there's a lot more. I'm going from the Christian faith right now, obviously, and I'm going from the Christian Bible. But again, this can apply so much to so many other things. And this is not to invalidate any other faith, but it's to say, no matter what you follow, don't be afraid to question the things within that faith that you're not sure about. And if there isn't a good answer for you, well, then search for your correct answer yourself. And understand that my feeling is you are not violating that faith. You are not betraying God in any sort of way when you are looking and saying, okay, this part doesn't make sense to me. To me, by questioning and searching, you are trying to find God even more. You are trying to find a stronger, better relationship and understand something, so that if you later are having a conversation and you have the opportunity to help get someone on the path to God, you can answer something they might find suspicious. Because we live in a world today that's much more scientific. Things that way back in the time of the Bible, think about an iPhone or a computer today. If someone in the biblical times saw that, they would think it was this crazy magical device. They wouldn't understand this, nor could you even explain that huge jump, from what they knew, stone tablets and papyrus and all the different things they knew back then, to all of a sudden having something like this in your hands. So you can't really explain some of these complexities to them. Well, today we understand this stuff. We understand science answers an awful lot of questions, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. Science doesn't answer all questions, and I strongly object to anyone who says that science disproves religion or religion disproves science. I think they do not have to be enemies of one another. I think they fill gaps for one another that exist. And quite honestly, science in its own way, when it's true, and it is a search for our Creator. It is a search for our beginnings, and I don't think in any case does it disprove a Creator and God. If anything, it will help us move closer to understanding what our God is and what our Creator is and where our origins begin. But that being said, is when you look at people today and you tell them, listen, you must believe this religion, you must believe it in its entirety. And so in this case, we're going to talk the Bible. And we're going to say, listen, the Bible itself is the absolute word of God that has not been corrupted by man in any way. And it is, that you have to accept that. Well, and if you don't accept it, you can't, in some religions, not all Christian religions are this way, but many, well, then you're wrong. You're sinning. You're outside of what is acceptable to God. And a lot of people will choose to say, okay, forget it. Then if I have to believe this wholeheartedly and accept everything, that the Bible says, when clearly we have answers for some of these things, and clearly some of these things are not true. Well, some people choose just to walk away and say, then I don't accept. And that's the problem. Anybody that really knows, and I do think a lot of pastors and priests, and there are a good group out there, and non-denominational reverends like myself, will tell you that the Bible, for the most part, while some of it is likely historical, much of it were stories, parables, things that explained complex situations to simple minds, help them understand very, very complex things in a simple way. And they were stories to give you a good guide on how to live life. There's so much in the Bible that you might not say, okay, that's the Word of God, but it is good life advice. And there's nothing wrong with good life advice, right? We want that. We always want that. And but so much of the Bible, there are so many chapters of the Bible that were removed. There were chapters that were voted on by the church and by rulers and kings, and then chosen to be removed. There are the Gnostic texts. There's so much out there that say such different things. And so who's to say what was true, what wasn't? And the reality of it is, God gave us free will. And when you have free will, you have the freedom to choose whatever you do in your life. And then, of course, you suffer whatever consequences, good or bad, from those choices. And so to say that somehow the Bible has made it through all of this time without any corruption from man is wrong. Okay, it clearly has been corrupted by man. Mankind will corrupt anything in the name of power, and they will utilize it to gain more power. And people often have misused religion for horrible, horrible things. And unfortunately, I'm getting a little off track because this is going to get into a whole nother episode. But, by doing that, it gives the enemies of God, the enemies of faith, the enemies of believing in something beyond this life, the ammunition that they need to try to destroy it. And it's unfortunate. But the reality of that is, anywhere there is humanity, there will be corruption. Anywhere there is humanity and a chance for power and influence, there will be corruption. Okay? And that's just the truth of life. Now, getting back to the nature of God, one thing that's always very important to me, and one discussion I kind of like to have with people, and I want you to understand, because I do think it's something that a lot of people who struggle, and if you're one of those people who struggle with accepting, is there a God? This is some of the areas that you struggle with. Now, when you talk about the God of the Bible, you often hear that God is a vengeful God. God is a jealous God. You hear plenty of stories about this being the case. And it's an area I always had a hard time with, right? And including the concept of hell. I always had a hard time with that, because that does definitely play into the vengeful God, where, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're going to burn for an eternity in a pit of fire. And wow, that's scary, right? But all that also sounds very human to me. Jealousy, let's take jealousy, for instance, and say God is a jealous God. Now, there are a lot of ways you can interpret that, and I have heard some good discussions about that. But for my case, and what I wish to discuss, and I welcome any conversation that anyone wishes to have about this, but to assign a word like jealousy is one of the ultimate human frailties. It's a human weakness. And why would we assign such a frail human weakness to our Creator? What does God have to be jealous about? Absolutely nothing. This is our Creator. God has zero to be jealous about in any way, shape, or form. I just can't accept that human weakness. To say God is a vengeful God. Vengeance, anger are, again, human weaknesses. It's so much easier to tap into anger. It's so much easier to go for revenge and be vengeful when someone's done you wrong than it is to forgive. It's so much easier to be angry than it is to be happy. It's so much easier to, try to get even than it is to forgive and forget and move on. Again, to show the nerd that I am, I was a Star Wars kid, but it really is when George Lucas talks about the light side and the dark side. And, if you notice the Sith and the dark side of things, it's very powerful. Anger is very powerful. It's a wonderful, powerful thing. And man, I tell you what, when you tap into that anger, when you're mad at something, you can feel very powerful and strong for a bit there. Unfortunately, you tend to feel very drained afterwards, and bad things tend to follow. That anger eats you up over time and destroys the relationships around you, and it turns you into a husk of what you once were. Where when you forgive and when you find happiness, the payoff often is much slower, sometimes never even seen at all. But when it is seen, karma, you could call it, you find a much happier life at that in the end. So it's always, I would say, much more divine reality when you talk about a God that's loving and a God that's kind and a God that's forgiving. To me, that is a sign of divinity. That is a sign of holiness. That is a sign of good. That is a sign of strength. Vengeful, jealous, I've never accepted that, and I don't think I can. And part of the reason for that, again, is my view of God. Okay, now God can be anything. I always refer to God as he, him, as a man, because that's what I was raised with. Okay, and you have to understand, God is none of these things. God is neither a he, not a she. And God is God. God is our creator. And however you feel comfortable to referring to God, well, that's how you refer to God. Okay. And God can be anything, as long as we are discussing and we're looking at someone from the standpoint of, sorry about that. I pulled everything off of my controls here and shut everything down for a minute. Like I said, this is not a professional setup here. And so anyway, where was I? So when you talk about God and you talk about this jealousy and vengefulness and things of that nature, again, I look at God as a father, right? As a parent. And if you have children, even if you don't have children, I'm sure you can understand the concept here. Yes, you get angry at your children, but how often do you get jealous? If you're a real pure, loving parent, you don't get jealous of your children. Exceptions to every rule, I understand that. There are people fighting a lot of demons that would. But we're talking about a divine creator here. Again, why would you be jealous of anything with your children? Also, when you are a parent, you get angry. Sure, you get upset with your kids. And you will punish those children, okay? A good parent will not do a punishment out of anger, will not do a punishment out of jealousy. A good parent will do a punishment strictly out of realizing and recognizing that your child is doing something that is bad for them or harmful for them. And you want to have the opportunity to show them not to do that. For their own good. You're trying to teach them how to be a better person, a safer person, whatever that might be. But there is a purpose to the punishment. There is, there's a reason for it. There's something you're trying to handle, trying to teach. It's a teaching moment. It's not a moment of vengeance. It's not a moment of jealousy. It's not a moment of anything. Which also then comes back to, the concept of hell. Okay, so yeah, I've been pretty angry at my kids. I have 2 of them. They're grown adults now. But, as children, they made me angry, and even as adults, they sometimes make me angry. So you ask yourself, okay, that being understood and that being said, is there anything that they could do that would make me want them to die and burn in an eternal pit of fire? that is so egregious and so awful that I'd want them to suffer for an eternity? And the answer to that's no. I mean, could they do some pretty awful things that would make me be very upset with them? Obviously. But my love for them is absolute. And I would think that our God, our Creator's love for us is absolute. And as a evolved divine being that understands and knows the purpose for everything within our lives, I have to feel that the challenges that God puts before us in our lives, whatever those challenges might be, if I have said in episode 1, my parents are both out of my life at a very young age. My mother, who I absolutely adored, died when I was 12 years old. And these were all very big life-changing situations for me. But I would never, now in retrospect, look back and be angry at God like I was back then for what happened, because those events put my life on the path that it is today, and who I am today and where I am today, I'm good with, and I'm very happy with. And none of this would have happened had my mother not passed away, had my parents not been out of my life at a young age, had I not gone through the experiences that I went through. I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have the children that I have today. Even my first wife, who cheated on me and abandoned her children and divorced me, I don't regret any of that, nor do I even have any real remaining anger at her in any way, because, while yes, it was very hurtful for the children when that happened in those days, in the end, all of that still put us on the path that we're on today. And any change within life, if I hadn't met my ex-wife and went through what I went through, I wouldn't have my 2 children that I have today. If I didn't have the 2 children I have today, my daughter wouldn't have the husband she has. We wouldn't have the grandchildren we have. I never would have met my wife that I have now. My son wouldn't have been in the military, and in his very first patrol out at sea, saved the lives of 5 people. One could say those 5 people wouldn't be alive today. So you have to understand that there is a bigger picture for everything, and there is a bigger reason for everything, and you're not always going to see that right away. It's not always going to be obvious, because God works in very large scales of time and in very large scales of just everything within this universe. Okay, we often, humankind and mankind, we're very self-centered, we're very full of ourselves, and we think that we're just the ultimate important of everything, and we're a very small part of everything. Not to say we are not important to our Creator, we are, but our Creator has a lot of children. Okay, I have 2 children and 2 grandchildren, and that's a lot to take care of, and it's a lot to think of. So when you're going on Earth alone to the billions, and who knows on what other planets and what other parts of the universe there may be other life, there really is a lot going on there. So for me, I hope what anyone can understand and what anyone can accept and anyone can just, if you're having doubts, right, and you're very uncomfortable with the idea of organized religion or outright against organized religion, and if you're against accepting any particular God in one way or another, or if in any way any of these things is because of the inconsistencies that you see within religions, all I ask is to hear my words. It is okay. It is okay. There is no one right way. I mean, think of it from a logical standpoint. Every religion, or let me generalize, not to be general, many religions say, either you follow this faith or you're going to hell, or whatever their version of hell is. Our way is the only way. there's a lack of logic there especially if you look at God the way I do, as a parent, a loving parent that created us for whatever reason that we will not know until the day that we die. And maybe not even then. Whatever faith you are born into, so if you're born into the Muslim faith, the Christian faith, if you're born into any one of the, if you're born into an agnostic family or someone just a Wiccan family or any of the African faiths that were out there, and whatever it may be, whatever you were born into, that's what you typically are. Now you might sway from that later in life as I did, but initially at least that's what you are for a while. And let's say the Jehovah's Witness faith was the only way to make it to heaven. There's not a whole lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Or say the Mormon faith, whatever you want to say. There's not as many of those. And that's the only way to do it, okay? Why then would God create so many people only to condemn them to hell? Why would so many people throughout the world be born into the Christian faith, the Muslim faith, Lutheran, Catholic, Protestant, whatever you want, Baptist, wherever you want to go with these other religions and beliefs? Every single one of them, if one is right, then all the rest are condemned forever, with no chance of being saved, outside of if they just completely change who they are, what they are, and what they believe in. Doesn't make sense to me. I could be wrong. And I'm willing to accept that I might be wrong. But again, no one can prove that I am, nor can I prove that I'm right. All I can say is this is how I see my God. And my God, my Creator, would not put so many people on this earth simply to condemn them to hell. I don't believe it. I don't want to believe it. I won't believe it. I think my God is a loving, caring Creator. And doesn't care how you find Him, just as long as you take the first step. Just as long throughout your life you are trying to figure out your meaning, trying to do it without doing harm to others, doing the best that you can to help others when you can, but not always at your own expense, although there are plenty that are so selfless that they can and they will. And to know it's okay to not be perfect, because you're not. You're human. You're going to do things you shouldn't do. You're going to realize it. And even sometimes, I can tell you, I can have a temper on the road, or I can grumble under my breath about someone being an idiot for something that they did. And is that a very godly thing to do? No, but I'm not God. I am a human. When I was much younger, I drank a lot. I did drugs. I slept around quite a bit, and all very ungodly things to do. But at the same time, I'm not God. I'm human. And I've learned from some of those things. And again, all of those experiences brought me to where I am today. And again, I have no regrets for any of them. But we all have to learn in our own way. We all have to find out what's right for us in our own way. And all I ask any of you to do is to just accept the fact, and let's have the conversation, okay? And I shouldn't say accept the fact, because again, I do try to be, I'm going to speak in generalities sometimes, and for that I apologize, but just accept that there's a very good chance that there's a creator of some sort, okay? That this isn't all just happenstance, but also that our ministry, and there are many others out there like it, accepts the fact that we don't have all the answers. Accepts the fact that as long as we're having conversations that are trying to understand what this is all about, and we're doing it in good faith and with respect to one another, and in the end, our goal is to try to learn how to live harmoniously with one another and help each other when we can, and be good to one another, Um, well, that's what matters, because that's what God, I think, would want. As you look through and you read a lot of the different faiths and belief systems out there, and it's called comparative religious studies, and you'll see there's a lot of different stuff, but there's also certain core things that hold true throughout most faiths. And to me, that's the DNA of God, right? There's certain things that most people just know is right, and things that are wrong. There's things you just do and things you just don't do. And that's the DNA of God within each of us. That's why we have those commonalities, even in areas where we have such great divides and great differences. So my biggest hope is that you'll just say, let's start there. Let's start there with, okay, there's a creator, there's something. Now, what do we call that creator? What is the nature of that creator? And even Albert Einstein, there are quotes out there, and I'll end up sharing. There's one I can't remember verbatim, so I'm not going to say it, which kind of talks against God, but I'm going to use that in another episode. But towards the end of his life, Einstein, one of the smartest men in the world of science, did believe there was a God, but he saw God in nature. He saw God in the trees around us, and he saw God in the numbers, but he saw something in his mind. What that something was, again, is undefinable, right? And that's the problem when you talk about faith, you talk about religion. There is no, at the moment that we know of, way to prove or disprove any of it, right? But don't hold the unbending, inflexible traditions of a lot of organized religion. Don't allow that to keep you away from God, okay? Because understand, those are the failings of man. Those are not the failings of God, okay? God didn't make these rules, and I know that will upset some people. But the reality of it is, God did not make these rules. Man made these rules. And if you're going to be intellectually fair and honest, I think you have to accept religion is a guess. It's a guess at what you think and believe as best you can. And I'm going to be honest and say everything I'm saying to you is exactly that as well. Yes, it's something through years and years of thought and discussion and study that I've come to, but I'm still just a man. No better than you or anyone else, worse than many. And I'm guessing. I could be right. And if I'm being entirely honest, I have fear sometimes that what if I am wrong and I'm misleading people? Well, I don't want to mislead people, but I think God knows my heart. And my heart is that I want people to find God. I see this world is getting too far away from God. I see that many of the problems that we have is because we worship celebrity way too much. I don't want to get in too much of a rant here, but if you are someone, there's nothing wrong with admiring an actor, a reality TV star, a musician. There isn't, okay? Their talents make you smile. Your talents bring you happiness, okay? But the reality of it is they live in a world very separate from the world that you live in. They may have one time shared your struggles, but many of them have long forgotten those struggles. And even if they want to acknowledge them, acknowledging those struggles and acknowledging their own blessings puts them in a position, especially in today's world, where they may lose those things. And let's face it, I'm not going to demonize people. I would like to think if suddenly I had millions and hundreds of millions of dollars, it wouldn't change me. But the reality of it is, it's beyond the money. When you all of a sudden have all the money that you need, you're surrounded by people who want that money. And those people will tell you anything you need or want to hear to make sure that they themselves are not separated from the ability to get some of that money. You find yourself in a bubble where you deal with the situation like Will Smith. Here's a guy that went from being a regular guy to being unbelievably rich and famous, and then ends up in a really strange world to where he gets up and does what he does and slaps a man for a joke. And the whole world is now turned against him, or many have. And not that I condone anything that Mr. Smith did in that case, but his wife has some blame there as well for the way that she was very self-important and very indignant about a very mild joke that even if Mr. Rock had known about her alopecia, there's a lot of people suffering with much worse than hair loss. I'm bald. I've lost all my hair. My mom died of cancer. My brother's got stage 4 cancer and is fighting for his life right now. This victim mentality, and I'm so brave and I'm so this. No, you're just a very wealthy person that's got a very, very good life, and it's unfortunate that that's happening. But to drive your husband, and then your husband acting the way that he did over something like that, it's just it's not a way we should treat one another. Nor should we sit there and be overly condemning of the Smiths in that situation either. We'll get into that in another conversation. But anyway, the point of this, I'm getting into about 41 minutes now, and I want to try to keep these under 45 minutes, and sometimes the longest an hour, is as we move forward in our conversations. The point of this one, again, is, what is God to you? That's my question. What is God to you? How do you see God? How do you see the Creator? Is there anything that I've said today in regards to God's nature? Is that anything that you find objectionable? Is there anything about it that, opened your mind a little bit? These are still surface level conversations. We can obviously get much deeper in all of this, but, just understand religion and God are not one and the same. They are two very different things. You do not have to accept one another in order to believe in the other. You don't. And if there is no God, what harm is there in searching to see if maybe there is? As long as you're doing no harm in the way, in your path, let's at least look. Let's go take a look and see. Let's see, maybe this guy's got a point. Maybe it's worth exploring and trying to develop some sort of relationship. If no other thing is gained from it, maybe you yourself will just find a little more happiness in life. It can be totally selfish. That's okay. Maybe your initial pursuit is for selfish reasons, and that is to maybe just clear your mind, find a little happiness, peace in your life, peace around for those around you. Maybe it enables you to de-stress a little bit, drop your anxiety a little bit, and maybe just find a purpose of some sort. That's all okay, right? But in the end, understanding that there's more to this world, that there is a creator, and understanding that we are all in this together, not as Americans, Canadians, Iranians, Russians, Ukrainians, Filipinos, whatever. We're all just humans. And yes, our countries identify ourselves, our cultures play into our identity, but in the end, we're humans on this planet. And let's find God, let's find one another, and let's find a way to heal the wounds. So again, I'm going to sign off for today's episode, but whatever path you choose on your journey to find God, all we ask is please take that first step. So Reverend Jason, God bless you all, and I look forward to talking to you again here shortly in the future. Be safe.